Evelyn Harper sat by the window of her sunlit apartment, tracing idle patterns on the condensation that had formed from her morning coffee. Outside, the city moved in a predictable rhythm, unaware of the subtle turmoil brewing within her. On the surface, her life was enviable: a thriving career in interior design, a beautiful home, and a husband who had, at least once, seemed perfect. But perfection, she had come to realize, was often a veneer, thin and fragile, easily chipped by time and neglect. Her thoughts drifted to Gideon Clark, her husband of 6 years. He had that effortless charm that drew people in, the kind that made strangers warm up in seconds. But lately, charm had become a mask for absence. Gideon spent long hours at the office, and when he returned, he seemed to carry with him an invisible weight that he never shared. Conversations had dwindled to polite exchanges about groceries, bills, or the mundane details of life. Evelyn felt as though she were sharing space with a stranger whose memories she was beginning to forget. She tried not to resent him. Gideon's ambition had always been part of his allure. It was why she had fallen in love in the first place. But love, she realized, could not survive on ambition alone. The late nights, the missed dinners, the hollow apologies, it all built a wall she could not climb, no matter how desperately she tried. Sometimes, she wondered if he even noticed her absence, or if it had become a permanent fixture of their marriage. Invisible, yet suffocating, work had become her refuge. Among swatches, sketches, and the hum of creativity, she found a semblance of peace. It was there she first met Alden Moore. He was unlike anyone she had known: attentive without being intrusive, warm without being overwhelming, and observant in a way that made her feel seen. At first, their interactions were purely professional, exchanged over design boards and client meetings. But soon, she realized she looked forward to his presence with a nervous eagerness that both thrilled and terrified her. Maya Lawson, her closest friend since college, had noticed the shift in Evelyn's demeanor long before she acknowledged it herself. Over coffee one Saturday, Maya had leaned across the table, eyes sharp with concern. "You're distracted," she said. "Something's going on at home, isn't it?" Evelyn had smiled, deflecting with practiced ease. "It's nothing. Just tired, that's all." But Maya's intuition was relentless. "It's not nothing, Ev. You're different. You're restless." Evelyn wanted to argue, to insist that her life was fine, but she could not. Restless was accurate. Unfulfilled, lonely, all of it pressed against her chest like an uninvited weight she could not lift. That evening, Gideon arrived home later than usual. The apartment, quiet and orderly, seemed almost sterile without his presence. He greeted her with a brief smile, kissed her cheek perfunctorily, and retreated to the study with his laptop. Evelyn watched him go, feeling the familiar sting of isolation. Dinner was cold, untouched, as she mechanically fed herself while listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the window. It was in these moments, in the spaces between words and gestures, that she felt most acutely the absence of intimacy she had once taken for granted. Her mind wandered again to Alden. He had sent her a message that morning, a simple check-in. "Hope your presentation went well. Thinking of you." Nothing overtly romantic, nothing inappropriate, yet the words carried a warmth that made her pulse quicken. She knew the line she was treading, the danger in her admiration. But the feeling was irresistible, a whisper of the attention she craved, the connection she had been missing. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a private smile, a small rebellion against the monotony that had claimed her life. Sleep came fitfully that night. Evelyn lay in bed beside Gideon, listening to the even rhythm of his breathing, feeling the chasm that had quietly opened between them. She thought of a life they had built together, of the promises made in the early days of love, and she mourned quietly for the intimacy that had faded. Her heart ached, not with anger, but with yearning, for attention, for understanding, for the sense that she mattered as deeply to someone as she mattered to herself. By morning, she had resolved to reclaim a fragment of that feeling, to seek moments of life that reminded her she was more than a shadow in her own home. She dressed for work with deliberate care, choosing a soft blouse that made her feel confident and a skirt that reminded her of her own elegance. The act felt revolutionary, a small defiance against the numbness that had settled in her days. Today, she would face the world on her terms, even if only for fleeting moments. As she left the apartment, the city bustling around her, Evelyn felt a flicker of anticipation. She did not yet know what lay ahead, what choices awaited her, or how her life would shift in the coming weeks. All she knew was the quiet pulse of possibility that thrummed beneath her skin, the possibility of connection, of desire, of love found in unexpected places. For now, it was enough to walk into the morning with her head held high, a secret thrill tucked like a fragile flame in her heart. And in that quiet, almost imperceptible way, Evelyn Harper began a journey she could not yet name, a path that would challenge everything she believed about loyalty, passion, and the boundaries of the heart. Evelyn Harper found herself lingering at her office desk long after most colleagues had left. The hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of coffee created a strangely comforting cocoon. Alden Moore was still there, seated across from her, reviewing a set of design proposals with meticulous care. He glanced up, catching her eyes with a subtle smile that made her chest tighten, and for a moment, the world outside that office seemed to vanish. "Did you manage to finalize the colors for the Whitman project?" he asked, his tone casual yet attentive. Evelyn nodded, handing over her sketches. His fingers brushed hers briefly, a touch so fleeting it could have been accidental, yet it lingered in her mind long after. She forced herself to focus, but every glance, every small gesture, carried weight she could not ignore. Work became an unspoken bridge between them. Meetings that once felt mundane now carried undercurrents of something more, a shared understanding, an empathy that Evelyn had not felt in months with Gideon. She found herself anticipating Alden's arrival, the sound of his voice, the way he listened without judgment. In his presence, her laughter returned, light and unrestrained, a stark contrast to the quiet resignation that had characterized her evenings at home. Maya Lawson had noticed the shift immediately. Over their usual Saturday coffee, she leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concern. "Evelyn, you're glowing. But it's different. There's excitement there. You can't hide it." Evelyn stirred her drink nervously, looking down at the swirling cream. "It's nothing, Maya. Just work, really." But the truth, unspoken yet undeniable, was that Alden represented a spark, a connection that had nothing to do with professional collaboration. Maya's sharp eyes saw the flicker of longing Evelyn tried to suppress. Evenings at home grew more suffocating. Gideon's attention remained measured and distant, a polite performance of affection that left Evelyn aching for authenticity. She would watch him across the dining table, noting the way he absently scrolled through his phone, the habitual crease of worry between his brows, and she wondered when the man she had married had become a stranger. Their conversations, once filled with plans and shared dreams, had been replaced by logistics, appointments, bills, errands. And in those silences, Evelyn's thoughts inevitably turned to Alden. One rainy Thursday. The office was nearly empty. Evelyn and Alden stayed late, finalizing a client presentation. The sound of rain tapping against the windows created an intimate atmosphere, one that neither could ignore. "I can't believe how quickly this year has gone," Alden said, leaning back in his chair. "Time slips by when you're surrounded by deadlines, doesn't it?" Evelyn smiled softly, feeling the warmth of his words settle over her. "It does," she admitted. "Sometimes I forget to notice the little things, like how someone notices them." Alden's gaze lingered, earnest and unguarded. There was no pretense, no ulterior motive, just a quiet recognition of her presence, her effort, her essence. Evelyn's heart ached with a mixture of guilt and longing. She knew the path she was treading was precarious, yet the connection she felt with Alden was undeniable. It was a mirror to the emptiness she had endured at home, reflecting back the emotional intimacy she so desperately craved. Maya's warnings echoed in her mind. Be careful, Ev. Emotional closeness can be just as binding as anything else. You don't want to destroy yourself in pursuit of something that isn't real. Evelyn wanted to dismiss the caution, yet she could not. Every interaction with Alden felt like a gentle tug, a pull toward uncharted territory. It was intoxicating, dangerous, and yet, for the first time in months, she felt alive. The tension became more pronounced during a weekend office retreat. Evelyn and Alden were assigned to the same group, working together on a mock project for team-building exercises. Away from the usual distractions, their conversations grew deeper, more personal. They spoke of childhood memories, ambitions, and quiet fears, the kind of conversations Evelyn had not shared with anyone, least of all Gideon. She realized, with a mix of fear and exhilaration, how much she had been withholding from her own life, how much she had buried beneath routine and obligation. That'd be why the time the retreat ended. Evelyn felt a strange mixture of guilt and exhilaration. She returned home to Gideon, who was as polite and reserved as ever, yet somehow more distant, as though sensing her absence even when she was physically present. Dinner was quiet. Evelyn's thoughts wandered repeatedly to the retreat, to Alden's smile, to the moments that had made her feel seen. She tried to bury it, to focus on Gideon, but the emotional distance between them seemed insurmountable. That night, as she lay beside her husband, Evelyn realized the path ahead was no longer straightforward. Her heart was being tugged in two directions. One toward the stability of her life with Gideon, the other toward the warmth, attention, and understanding she found in Alden. It was a conflict that left her restless, turning over scenarios in her mind, wondering how a life divided between desire and duty could ever be reconciled. Yet, for all the guilt and uncertainty, one thing was clear. Evelyn Harper had awakened to the possibility of connection beyond what she had known. The spark that Alden represented was not fleeting. It was a mirror to the love and attention she had longed for, the emotional intimacy she had been missing. And as she drifted to sleep, the rain tapping softly against the window, she knew that her journey was just beginning. Choices would have to be made, boundaries tested, and hearts, including her own, laid bare in that quiet moment. Evelyn understood that the coming days would challenge her more profoundly than any project deadline or professional hurdle. Her emotions were no longer a silent undercurrent. They had become a force that demanded attention, reflection, and ultimately, action. And with that awareness, a mixture of anticipation and dread settled over her, compelling her to face the complexity of her heart with courage she had not realized she possessed. Evelyn Harper had begun to notice how quickly her days had come to revolve around subtle encounters with Alden Moore. A message in the morning, a shared coffee break, a fleeting smile across the office. Each interaction carried a weight she could not explain. It was as if a current had begun to run beneath the surface of her life, pulling her towards something she both feared and longed for. The distance with Gideon Clark had become a tangible presence in her home. He was polite, courteous, and in many ways, generous, but the spark that had once defined their marriage had dimmed. He noticed the little things, the calendar appointments, the grocery lists, but he rarely noticed Evelyn herself. She would speak to him about her day, about her thoughts and small triumphs, and he would nod absent-mindedly, absorbed in some unseen concern. The realization that she had become invisible to the man she loved was both painful and awakening. Alden, by contrast, listened. He remembered details she casually mentioned, asked questions about her favorite color schemes, the places she had visited in childhood, the projects she dreamed of completing. Each conversation, though innocent on the surface, carried a depth that Evelyn had not realized she craved. She found herself lingering near his workspace, prolonging meetings under the guise of professional collaboration. Her heart raced at the thought of simply sharing the same room with someone who seemed to notice her existence fully, without judgment. Maya Lawson, ever the perceptive friend, had become a quiet anchor in this storm of emotions. One evening, over dinner in a small cafe, she leaned in and studied Evelyn with her characteristic intensity. You're walking a tightrope, Ev, she said softly. I see it in your eyes. You're drawn to him, and it scares you. But you also seem alive in a way you haven't been for months. Just be careful. You don't want to hurt yourself or anyone else in the process. Evelyn nodded, stirring her tea absently, torn between the thrill of emotional intimacy with Alden and the weight of loyalty to Gideon. The tension between her dual realities became more pronounced during an office project that required long nights of collaboration. Evelyn and Alden worked side by side, sketching, debating, refining designs. Outside, the city's neon lights blurred in the rain-soaked streets, creating an atmosphere both intimate and charged with unspoken potential. Each shared glance or laugh felt amplified, a delicate vibration that reverberated through her chest. She began to question the boundaries she had always held sacred, wondering whether emotional closeness alone could be considered a betrayal, or merely the acknowledgement of a need she could no longer ignore. At tea home, Gideon remained unaware. He spoke of routine matters with precision and predictability, unaware that Evelyn's thoughts often wandered to Alden while she folded laundry or prepared dinner. Sometimes, she caught herself imagining how it would feel to be truly seen again, to have someone notice not just her presence, but the subtle quirks that made her who she was. The idea frightened her. She had vowed loyalty, yet her heart defied her promises, quietly rebelling against the emptiness that had settled into her marriage. One particularly late evening. After returning from a client meeting, Evelyn found herself in a reflective mood. She poured a glass of wine and sank into the armchair by the window, watching the city shimmer under a soft drizzle. Her phone buzzed, a simple message from Alden, asking if she had reached home safely. The thought that he had taken a moment to consider her well-being stirred a complex mix of gratitude and longing within her. She replied with a brief acknowledgement, then set the phone aside, staring out at the night, wondering how a connection so innocent could feel so consuming. Gideon entered the room quietly, his presence a reminder of the life she had built, the promises she had made. He smiled at her briefly, reaching for a newspaper, and she returned the gesture, masking the storm inside her. In that moment, Evelyn realized the chasm between them was not about love lost. It was about love unrecognized, unspoken, and unattended. She cared for Gideon deeply, but the intimacy she sought, the emotional nourishment her heart craved, had migrated elsewhere towards someone who could offer understanding and attentiveness. The emotional pull intensified during a company retreat, where Evelyn and Alden were assigned to the same team for an extended project exercise. Away from the usual confines of the office, their conversations deepened, becoming more personal, more revealing. Evelyn found herself laughing freely, sharing stories she had not spoken aloud in years, allowing herself to feel seen without fear or pretense. Alden's empathy and gentle encouragement created a safe space, one that contrasted sharply with the quiet distance she felt at home. Maya's cautionary words echoed constantly in her mind. Awareness doesn't absolve responsibility, she had said. Evelyn understood this intellectually, yet emotionally, she could not deny the comfort she found in Alden's company. Each shared moment heightened the tension she felt toward Gideon, highlighting the emotional gap between what she had and what she desired. The duality of her life became increasingly difficult to reconcile, leaving her restless and reflective long after each interaction ended by the time the retreat concluded. Evelyn knew she was approaching a critical juncture. Her heart had begun to prioritize connection over convenience, attention over obligation. She was caught between the familiar rhythm of life with Gideon and the undeniable emotional resonance with Alden. The choice she faced was not a simple one. It was fraught with moral complexity, with consequences she could only anticipate in fragments. Yet one truth was undeniable. She could no longer ignore the growing intensity of her feelings, nor the realization that her life, as carefully structured as it appeared, was on the cusp of transformation. That night, Evelyn sat alone in her apartment, the city lights casting fragmented shadows across the walls. She reflected on the weeks past, on laughter shared, conversations prolonged, and moments stolen in quiet intimacy. The emotional connection she felt with Alden was no longer a fleeting distraction. It had become a mirror to her own unmet needs, a reflection of the love and attention she had longed for but had failed to receive. As sleep approached, she understood that the coming days would demand clarity, courage, and honesty, even as the heart whispered in a language she was only beginning to comprehend. In the quiet hours before dawn, Evelyn Harper realized that her journey was shifting from awareness to decision. The path forward would test her boundaries, challenge her loyalties, and illuminate the desires she had kept suppressed. And though the future was uncertain, the emotional awakening she had experienced was undeniable, propelling her into a reality where love, longing, and fidelity would collide in ways she had yet to navigate. Evelyn Harper woke to the soft hum of the city below, the first rays of sunlight casting a warm glow across her bedroom. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of restlessness that could not be soothed by routine or distraction. Her thoughts immediately drifted to Alden Moore. Their recent interactions had grown more intimate, though never explicitly romantic, and the weight of unspoken emotions pressed against her chest. She knew she was teetering on the edge of a choice that would define the days to come. The office, the subtle electricity between her and Alden was palpable. He greeted her with a warm, knowing smile that made her pulse quicken, as she caught herself returning it with more intensity than usual. Every casual touch, a brush of the hand while passing a document, a brief touch on the shoulder during a discussion, felt amplified, loaded with meaning that neither dared speak aloud. Evelyn recognized the danger, but she could not deny the comfort she found in these fleeting connections. Meanwhile, Gideon Clark remained absorbed in his own world. His late nights at the office and habitual distractions at home had created a distance Evelyn could no longer ignore. She noticed the polite yet detached tone in which he spoke, the way he sometimes failed to remember small details she had shared the day before. His love, once vibrant and all-encompassing, had become a background rhythm to her days, a dependable but unremarkable presence that left her longing for acknowledgement beyond routine. Maya Lawson's warnings reverberated in Evelyn's mind like a constant refrain. "Emotional closeness is powerful," she had said, her voice steady with concern. "It can become a slippery slope if you're not careful. You owe it to yourself and everyone involved to recognize what's happening before it's too late." Evelyn nodded then, but now the words weighed heavier than ever. She understood the moral complexity of her feelings, yet she could not suppress the undeniable pull toward Alden. The emotional connection that seemed to fill the void Gideon had left point one evening. The office hosted a small networking event. Evelyn found herself standing near Alden, a drink in hand, listening to him speak with effortless charm to a group of colleagues. She noticed the way he occasionally glanced at her, the quiet attentiveness that had become so familiar. When he leaned in to offer her a comment about a client proposal, their hands brushed lightly. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, a reminder of the emotional bond they shared. Evelyn felt both exhilarated and guilty. Exhilarated by the attention, guilty for the thoughts she entertained about someone other than her husband. Later that week, Alden invited Evelyn to review a design proposal at a quiet cafe away from the office. She hesitated, aware of the implications, but the lure of uninterrupted conversation proved irresistible. They discussed layouts, color palettes, and client preferences, but beneath the professional dialogue lay unspoken understanding. They laughed at shared observations, exchanged stories about their families, and confided small personal truths, details Evelyn had not shared with anyone in months. The connection felt vivid and alive, unlike the careful, measured interactions she had with Gideon. Returning home that evening, Evelyn was met with the familiar routine of her life with Gideon. He greeted her with a tired smile, mentioning a work email he needed to respond to, and she realized how stark the contrast had become. At home, she felt unseen. With Alden, she felt known. The disparity gnawed at her, creating a tension that was both thrilling and disquieting. She lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, grappling with a whirlwind of emotions, loyalty, desire, guilt, and longing, all colliding within her heart. The emotional intensity reached its peak the following weekend. A professional conference required Evelyn and Alden to travel to the same city, sharing a hotel due to budget constraints. The close proximity brought the undercurrent of their feelings to the surface. In the quiet moments after long sessions of lectures and workshops, they found themselves walking together along the hotel corridor, discussing ambitions, fears, and hopes in low, private tones. The intimacy was undeniable, yet still restrained by their understanding of boundaries. Evelyn felt the tension coiling within her like a spring, aware that every word and gesture carried the weight of unspoken potential. Despite the magnetic pull toward Alden, Evelyn also confronted the reality of her commitment to Gideon. She remembered the early days of their marriage, the passion, the laughter, the unwavering support, and the thought of causing him pain brought a pang of guilt she could not ignore. The duality of her emotions, longing for Alden's attention while honoring her vows to Gideon, created a tumult that left her sleepless and restless. Each choice felt like a test of character, of integrity, and of the resilience of the human heart when faced with temptation. That'd be why the final evening of the conference, Evelyn realized that she could no longer navigate this emotional maze passively. She had to confront the desires that had taken root, the emotional bond that had grown stronger, and the responsibilities she carried in her marriage. She understood that the next steps she took would have lasting consequences, shaping the course of her relationships, her self-respect, and her sense of identity. Sitting by the hotel window, watching the city lights twinkle against the night sky, Evelyn felt the full weight of her choices pressing upon her. She was caught between stability and intensity, familiarity and passion, duty and desire. The moment she had shared with Alden had awakened her to a part of herself she had neglected for too long, a yearning for attention, understanding, and emotional resonance. And while the path forward was uncertain, Evelyn Harper knew one truth with clarity. She could no longer ignore the stirrings of her heart. In the quiet of that hotel room, with the hum of the city beneath her, Evelyn resolved to face the coming days with courage. Whatever decisions awaited her, whatever revelations she would encounter, she would no longer allow her life to be defined by absence and longing alone. She would confront the choices she had avoided, explore the desires that had surfaced, and ultimately determine what kind of love and what kind of life she truly sought.